Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever applies to you. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Julia. I'm a contemporary singing specialist based in Australia, and today I am diving back on into Unleash the Archers. Now, last time you guys said that if I wanted to hear some seriously insane belting stamina, then I have to listen to Tonight We Ride. So without further ado, let's dive on in. You might notice that I'm not using my regular old headset. Well, that's because I plugged it into charge, but didn't turn the PowerPoint on, so... Backup headset, yay. Let's go. Okay, so Brittney is already kicking off with that power belt straight in there. I'm gonna pitch check it in a moment, but the energy that I'm getting from this song already has me so hyped for where it's gonna go. I already feel like there's like a heart attack incoming, just that BPM. Oh, it's really, really fun. So I'm going to take it slightly back just so that we can hear that growl again, because that was the very first vocal sound that we had in here. It almost looked at one point like the sounds on the guitar were coming from Brittney because the camera focus was on her. I'm not saying that the guitar and the vocalist, but I can quite clearly see that it's not her vocalizing in that moment. Anyway, going back for this growl, because that was our first vocalization of the track. God, there are a few different things in there. Yeah. So it sounded like there were a few different vocal things that were laid on in there. We're going to keep going, but I think that's really cool how it started with something that just like hits and off we go. It really grabs you and makes this already seem like a really fun time. So we're going to keep going. So you can hear that little edge of distortion that's introduced into a sound there. Once we have the first belt coming through nice and clean, a little bit of distortion's introduced at the end. It kind of falls to a kind of a fry-y sound if I go back and find it. Yeah, so she's closing to that fry quality, and on the second one she's starting with distortion. One of the ways that you can introduce distortion into your sound is through compression, and this is something that it's usually best to play around with and really gauge whether something hurts. Something can be uncomfortable, but if it hurts, you need to tap out and just be kind to your vocal folds. If you're a beginner, don't try and do this stuff for 15 hours. It won't bode well for your fatigue and recovery if you try to do something new that's potentially high impact and a little bit stressful for your vocal apparatus for prolonged periods of time. As I mentioned in my last video reacting to Unleash the Archers, Brittney's stamina is like of the highest flipping quality. I can't. Actually, let's go back so you can hear that contrast one more time.
Hold on to this moment.
pause it, otherwise I'm not gonna know where to pause. Oh my god, this is gonna be like a 45-minute long video, isn't it? I can't decide what I want to talk about first. The layering that's going on in the voice, or the fact that every now and again they interject with one of those really fast like guitar shredding patterns is, well, I guess I just mentioned it there, didn't I? Okay, onto the vocal layering. Loving how there's harmonies and a really full vocal presence going through off the main female vocalist. I can hear that it's the same timbre and the same quality as our lead singer here. If you ever have to do part writing for singing, this is typically called like an emphasis line, where it might be 1 or 2 words and you put power on it because you want to emphasize that particular section. So I'm really enjoying that. Just like interspersing those little fast guitar parts, it keeps my energy up, and I never kind of know what's going to happen next because, I mean, there are patterns there, but it starts off with our growl. Then we have what sounds like more like a group of people with a hey, hey. Then we have the solo power belt. That's already quite a vocal progression there from what you can anticipate and expect. Additionally to that, as Brittney is singing, we have different kinds of growls and layers of growls that are happening underneath her singing. So I'm wanting to just go back and re-listen to that, because while I was looking for a spot to pause, they kept doing so many different interesting things with the harsh vocal layering, and I get a little bit flustered if like too much has happened in a short time span. I'm like, I don't even know what to talk about. Still want to hear it. I don't want to pause every millisecond. So here we are. Let's just re-listen to it. Where is she? I mean, I'm doing this in second. I'm not belting up there. F5, G5, A5. Okay, she is mixing like a beast up there. Oh my god. Still with that metallic quality there, but sheesh. Oh my god, up to an A5? You guys weren't kidding from the last video where I was like, oh wow, D5. I think it was a D5. And you guys were basically like, D5. Yeah, okay. Now I understand. So it's not quite as full as she goes up there. You might have noticed that the intensity of the tone stays there, but the fullness of the sound, it gets a little thinner as she goes higher. Your voice is going to react differently depending on your voice type, your own personal anatomy, your own physiology, on how your vocal tract is going to want to amplify those sounds, which harmonics happen to be strengthened because the form and frequency of your pharyngeal shape. So everybody's going to have sort of a different degree to which they can take up that kind of belt. Ultimately, though, it's really bright, it's really pingy. This is a really accessible sound for someone like Brittney's voice type. And I know that might be like, oh, duh, obvious. But for everyone, it's not quite as obvious just how high they can take those sounds and how high they can take them before they start to sound terrible. So Brittney's voice type is able to take up those sounds and for them not to sound horrendous. The main thing to take away from this, though, is that the tonal quality, there's not going to be as much flexibility up there unless she was to change that vocal approach, and then it might put her into a sound that wouldn't necessarily match the energy of this particular style of music. I think that's really important to note, but holy moly, she takes that mix way up. And yeah, so a little bit more full on that power belt. We get a little bit more grit as well through some of her lower notes, but just the accessibility to go up there with that with that sound, that much acoustic energy. Jesus. Oh my god. All right, we're gonna keep going. Love the variation from clean singing as her like supporting harmony into the growl there. That sounds so cool. I'm also loving the Mad Max vibe of this video clip. Just by the way, I've made a Furiosa reference before. If you know what reaction that reference was in, you can let me know in the comments, but this is really epic. Okay, so we're going to re-listen to that section, and the bit you're listening for is how the supporting vocalist, it sounds like a male vocalist that's providing that line underneath, goes from clean singing, also good amount of metallic energy in his sound, not quite as sharp as what Brittney's having to do to go all the way up to that A5, but there's still that edge quality to his singing. So that supporting vocal line going on in there, it then turns into this growl which happens underneath. So I want you to listen to that, okay? My God, girl, where you going? Okay, she's going back up to that A5. Oh my God, Brittney, you're making me look like a goose. You know why? Because the belting she just did then that I said wasn't quite as it was a little bit more thin before in her approach. She just put a hell of a lot more grit and energy into that sound. This is why you shouldn't try to say that there's a limit on anything, because what might seem like a logical place for you to anticipate something to be based off your current understanding, there's some vocalists that are just going, well, those rules don't apply to me, do whatever I want. All right, let's go back and re-listen to that, because goodness. Actually, I'll insert just a little clip of the first time she goes up to that A. This is the second time she goes up to that A. There's so much more energy in this sound. I would actually say, if I were to compare these two sounds, she's going up to the same notes. Caption Julia will let you know if the vowel work would be the same. That comparison between the two sounds. The first one is actually probably what I would call more of like a length and a dominant balanced belt through there, because she's got that metallic edge, but there's none of the harsh constriction qualities, which is funny because to even achieve that sound, you need a moderate amount of constriction as you're going higher up. But on this version, on the second time she goes up to that A5, there's a lot more constriction in that sound, in that she needs it to facilitate the amount of grit and energy and edge that's currently going on in her belt. Oh my goodness. I'm not even halfway through. She makes it through this whole song. Is this the approach the whole time? What an absolute weapon. Just, a vocal tank. My goodness. We'll find our destination. Can't tell us where to go. We won't give it this time. Not this time. I'm really enjoying like the moments where that little comes through. There was a lot more spit in that than I intended, but I'm trying to learn like the specific names for all these different kinds of screams. And what I'm finding is, because there hasn't been as much research into what specific things are called and the parameters of how far that particular label can be applied to certain sounds. So you'll have to deal with my unorthodox interpretations and weird analogies until such time as people can agree on what to call things. So let's go. super effective use of space, handing over the solos there. Loved the really fast kick work going on in the drums. This whole band, their musicianship is just insane. Like the technical efficiency with which they execute some of these things. I mean, for a lot of people, playing something fast doesn't necessarily mean that they play it well. And in this case, they're playing fast and they're playing well. Like, I mean, it's a recording. It's not like a live. It's not like a live situation. So you would hope it'd be perfect in the recording, but no, to pull it off in the first place, like, come on. Come on, these guys are ridiculous at what they do. Let's keep going. Oh, and that little reference to space. Space is not the enemy. Space is not you don't need to necessarily fill every little bit of space. And here it was used as a great break between the two solos to hand them over, because within that little space we get almost like a semi moment to breathe, but then we keep going, so it doesn't lose any of that energy. Not that it would lose energy if they did just hand straight over, but I think musically it just adds an extra thing in the mix to build tension of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, classic Julia. Okay, so something else I just wanted to quickly comment on, of course, something else I just quickly wanted to comment on was the fact that in this particular song, you hear a lot more of those kind of darker qualities that are coming through in Brittney's sound. Within the darkness of that sound as well, you can hear just a tiny bit of the tongue root assisting in order to facilitate some of those darker qualities. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you can like switch it off, which in the last song I heard Brittney play around with that like almost the entire time when she wasn't belting, which was these little variations in darkness and subtle tonal changes when she was in her first register. Anyway, I am liking the connectivity and how there's energy in both parts of Brittney's vocal delivery thus far. We've got the energy of a slightly darker tonality in the first register work that she's doing through this section here, and then that really acoustically intense sound coming from that mixed metallic belt taken all the way up to the A5 with distortion in there. Like that's insane. Just straight up stamina goals. Straight up stamina goals. Oh my goodness. We'll find our destination. Let's go. Okay, I flippin' loved that. I was half like being like, oh my god, is she gonna go up even more? As in, I wasn't sure if she was just gonna go up to the note that we kind of would anticipate. But what happened is she didn't go up, but the male vocalist did. I'm really impressed with how they've managed that balance in there, actually. Whoever recorded this, I'm liking it because the male vocalist is powerful all on his own, at least judging from the timbre that I can hear coming through in his backing vocals. So if they were to the same level, it would, yeah, I would love to see this live. I don't think I'd survive a concert like this live. I wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 days afterwards. This is enough energy to keep you going for a week. Let's re-listen to that. So I was like, oh, is she going to go up? And I was almost like, oh God, what's it going to sound like if she goes up that high? It can be done. It can be done. But yeah, whew. But let's just hear that choice in the arrangement one last time. Again, these growls and like little screams that are kind of happening. So if we focus on just the tonality that we're hearing, regardless of what we want to call it, we can still hear that there's a difference in some of these sounds. And the primary difference for me in this particular performance is hearing that higher, I'm going to call it like a little schmiegel, screamy type thing. The tonality isn't going like Will Ramos high, but it's still got that higher tonality coming through in sound. And then we have these lower growls which are also present. And I like the journey between those two things and the fact that there are different tonal shifts within just those two sounds alone. They seem to marry quite well together, going from one layer to the next. So actually, if you did happen to catch my first Unleash the Archers reaction, which was Awakening, that little mini harmonics formant lesson that I gave at the end of it, that applies to your harsh vocals. So if you remember, your formant frequency is the frequency of the space or the container, in this case, the different parts of your pharynx. That formant frequency determines what kind of tonal shift you get within a particular harsh vocal, because ultimately that sound is having to propagate through that space. It's still getting filtered by the formant frequency. So remember, smaller spaces, higher formant frequencies, larger spaces, lower formant frequencies. And so you can actually apply that aspect of the lesson to your harsh vocals. Perhaps not the fundamental frequency aspect of that particular thing that I spoke about, unless of course you're doing a combo harsh vocal, which involves both the true folds and other things moving around to create sound in breath flow. Like, just, it's all kind of amazing, to be honest. But anyway, you can apply that in there, and I'm appreciating that we do get those variations within the harsh vocals in this. It's almost like the harsh vocals have their own little journey underneath the melodic line. I'm liking this. I like the duality of it. I like how it doesn't overwhelm the melody line, but it's still present and exciting and interesting. It supports the enjoyment of the piece as a whole. So let's just finish this out, and then I'll give you guys my final thoughts. So right there, we get an example of what I was just talking about, where you have that schmiegel scream sound that's coming through the top, slightly higher tonality, and then you get that lower, deeper, darker sound. So think smaller space for the high schmiegel sound, and then larger pharyngeal space for that lower quality. Keep going. Whew. Whew. I'm gonna need a nap. I didn't even do anything and I'm tired. Okay, wow. I mean, it's just stamina goals, just straight up. I said it, I think I said it before. I'll say it again. Maybe I said it in my mind. I don't remember. Stamina goals. For all of them, that's incredible. I mean, vocally, the physical side of this song is what would be most challenging with singing it. The stamina required, even the first 2 minutes, I think a lot of vocalists would have to tap out. So from Brittney, we have this incredible physical ability to execute really high belting, being able to take up that mixed belt tonality in both more of a balanced way, as well as having more compression, more grit, more presence of that sound, all the way up to that A5. Insane. You have that physical side from the vocal fold, and then you also have the physical side that her breathing and support is having to do in order to cater to her getting through this whole song. From a physiological standpoint, she's a weapon. She's an absolute tank, a vocal monster. You don't want this vocal monster chasing you because it's going to outpace you and get you. It would truly be a test of your own vocal stamina if you could get through a song like this. Another element that I just wanted to speak to quickly, and I'm not sure if I already have. If I have, I'll decide where I want to put it. Sometimes I focus so much on what I'm listening to, I forget what I just said sometimes. Brittney's having to do a lot of really high, intense vocalizations up in a particular part of her register. Yes, we can hear that. We understand that. Great. Shifting from that particular part of her voice down to that first register, that can be really taxing, like really taxing if your voice isn't used to it. So what's happening physiologically there is she's having to go from longer vocal folds because she's getting all the way up to that A5. Oh, the piano's turned itself off. She's gotten all the way up to that A5, longer vocal folds. They're in tension because they've been stretched out by our cracothyroid muscle, pulling that thyroid cartilage forward, stretching out those muscles. We've got long, tense vocal folds because they need to be. Of course, they're going to be tighter. They're going to be a little bit more tense because they're being pulled taut, of course. And then we have compression and shape that's going in her pharynx to facilitate those higher frequencies that are coming through. Bigger mouth opening, as well as her tongue position, I imagine, is quite high in order to pull off these sounds. So it would be sitting up a little bit more in the back of the mouth. And of course, that's going to change ever so slightly depending on what vowel she happens to be gunning for. I imagine, though, that everything above that F, I'll have to go back and re-listen, would be... she's modified some of those sounds in order to create a vowel that's going to best facilitate her maintaining that tonal quality up around that F, G, A, A5. Oh my God. Fifth octave belting is just like, how far can you go? Because the higher up, the more intense it gets, of course. But the more strain it will take, the more strain and the more danger that it can potentially introduce. Anyway, so she's gone from that physiological setup. The breath flow has to be able to balance for vocal folds at that tension. The breath flow has to be consistent to be able to produce an even tone, or at least a consistent tone, through vocal folds at that point of tension. And then she's having to drop back into her first register. The vocal folds are shorter, they're thicker, they're fatter. Like, the breath pressure has to adjust because the vocal folds are no longer in the same state they were for this prolonged period of time. It can feel like a completely different sensation. I know for myself personally, if I'm belting up higher, I don't get to in A5, let me be quite frank, but higher belting, so in that fifth octave above a C5 or above, if I'm up there for a really long time and I suddenly have to drop all the way down into a lower note, it can feel clunky the first time you attempt it, and you have to be able to facilitate that change in a way that your delivery in the lower part of your register isn't compromised. So I thought that was really well done from Brittney in this song. I'd love to see how she does it live. The song overall, I think, was composed really well. I think I mentioned this last time, but for songs that are really intense, that have a lot going on, it's very easy to sometimes feel overwhelmed. And the fact that you don't just speaks to the creativity and the choices that they made putting this song together. That harsh vocal line having its own journey underneath the melodic line. Little moments, that tiny little space between the two soloists. The fact that they interject different musical ideas every now and again coming from the guitar part. Like, all of this feeds into an experience that doesn't feel like it's overwhelming. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. Shout out to the musicians that are in this band. The level of playing is incredible. It's clean, it's fast. That energy never drops. And I like the way that they managed to integrate all those different ideas into a highly enjoyable song, even though it does feel like I just ran a marathon and I've been sitting on my butt this whole time. Anyways, that is where I'm going to leave that one today. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a like if you want to. You can click the subscribe button for more videos just like this one. As usual, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you are staying healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye.